Starting this month, SIFF is hosting a series called The Pacific Northwestern, highlighting Westerns shot right here in the Pacific Northwest. The films in the series span from 1946 to 2019, starring big names like Johnny Depp, Warren Beatty, Jimmy Stewart, and Gary Cooper, and they all highlight the natural beauty, but also the primal terror of the Pacific Northwest landscape. Today, we're speaking with Ryan Saunders, who programmed the series. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you for having me.
Also joining us is our resident film nerd, CityCast creative producer, Liam Billingham. Welcome, Liam.
Hello. Thanks for having me, as usual.
So when I picture a Western, I think like the most common image is like the John Wayne type. He's like in the desert. He's got the two guns pulled, you know? And I feel like that's a very different landscape from where we live. Like when people talk about the West, they're often imagining like the desert West. But what makes these films unique? Like what is it about the Pacific Northwest that you really wanted to highlight with this series, Ryan?
Yeah, I feel as though one of the fundamental elements of the Western is dryness and an arid landscape.
Right.
And that is something that is lacking overall in the films that I've put together here because they are quite moist. Some of them extremely moist, very damp. And yeah, for me, I've always had a fascination with regional filmmaking in general, films that are very tuned into the landscape because a landscape really influences the way a film feels, the way the characters interact with the world around them, and overall sets just like a different atmosphere and tone, depending on where you have the film set. And so it's like sort of natural then, that's just like a general fascination of mine across all film genres and styles. And I think that was one of the like entry points into the Western for me in general, because landscape is such a prominent element in Western styled cinema. And so like because of that, yeah, I got very interested in the American Southwest at a younger age, made a lot of trips to Arizona, Monument Valley, where you would see John Wayne, you know,
the classic
framed
backdrop from all that. Yeah,
exactly, right. Made those pilgrimages, been to like the Western museums, very kitschy and interesting. But then like I'm also just like a big hiker and an outdoors person, so I love being up in the mountains, and I started getting more fascinated with Westerns that are shot, especially outside of the Southwest. And I feel as though I got really interested in the Pacific Northwestern, as I've sort of like been referring to it, around the same time that I was moving out here. You know, so I'm from the Midwest originally, a very flat area, and I had dreams of like being in the mountains, right? And I feel like Westerns were a gateway for that. And with these films, there's something just so distinctly different about them that sets them apart to me from the standard Western. And again, I think a lot of it's just color palette, atmosphere, mood. You know, you don't often typically think of a Western being like so green and lush and having so much like fog and moisture, and it just adds like a totally different emotional atmosphere to the films in general. And then it also, I feel like, does influence the sort of like thematic angle that many of them
Yeah, I
take.
wanted to know, like, are these Westerns, like, do these have different themes than our more stereotypical, like, I'm in the desert Western?
I would say so. I mean, especially so if you take the regional specificity of them, these films, though most of them are like nominally set in the Northwest, a couple of them like say they're set in Montana or somewhere else, even though they're filmed out here. But in general, like one of the most like recurring tropes or themes that you'll find in a lot of these are the gold rush in general, which is something you don't really see in films set in the Southwest. Right. So just that fundamentally, because that was such a major element of westward expansion into the Pacific Northwest during the 1800s, these films start embracing other themes that you're not seeing as much in films set in the Southwest, and in particular property, you know, the development of capitalism in America and the way that like land and the idea of ownership is very different in the perspective of these films in particular, I think, because there's sort of this like mad rush. There's like this conflict in a lot of these films that I think is really well evoked in general, in the sense of many of these films are about like the possibilities of westward expansion. And the thought like, oh, there could be this utopia, but then there's sort of this apocalyptic reality of, well, if you're all rushing out here to claim property, to claim land for yourself, to go after gold, that there are these elements that like it all kind of like falls apart on itself, right? And then so many of these films to me become about like the foundational violence that the settling of this country is based on, right? Whether implicitly or explicitly.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm curious also. So I know that the films in the series span from basically like 80 years of film history. Has the way that those films like look at this moment in history like changed at all? Like, were the themes different at all? Or were they kind of all, I guess, of a piece of the same theme?
I think it's a very fluid and ever-changing thing, even within the films themselves. I think some of them are like quite mysterious. So my favorite film in the entire series is Jacques Tourneur's Canyon Passage, which is very much a World War II Western. It's a film that came out in 1946. It's like shot in just like stunning Technicolor in the Oregon landscape. And it's very much a film about this idea that I think a lot of these films share, which is there's this like hope and promise of like, what could it mean to set up, a quote unquote new world here? But if we embrace these elements of capitalism and greed and property, it all kind of just like burns down in this inevitable apocalypse. There's like a European character in the film that says, the trouble always comes, right? To someone who's just like hopeful about like, no, of course, this community and this civilization we're building is like so beautiful, right? And the film is like, so I think Martin Scorsese called it like the most mysterious example of like the Western ever made. And so much of the classic Hollywood films have that element of them. They kind of muddy the waters. They're ambiguous. There's so much baked into them, and they're very literary in the sense that there's so many different readings you could make of them. But then the further on you go, right? Like, I mean, we end, like, think about something like Dead Man, which is sort of like, I guess more than like 2/3 of the way through the time period here of the films that are covered.
Like, when was that made?
It was made in the 90s.
Okay.
I pulled 1995. Like, here's a film that like actually has an indigenous character who, has like a major speaking role in the he's just like a main character in the film and has like a radically different perspective, right?
Right, yeah. I
And,
wanted
like,
to ask if the portrayal of Native people changed in that time, because I do feel like white filmmakers' understanding of their role in this region definitely shifted over those 80 years.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, with the later films for sure, right? So like Dead Man and First Cow take a radically different perspective than many of the other films do. So like it's an interesting thing to track as you watch these films because especially with the classic Hollywood, there's like this inherent messiness to the way they're trying to reckon with it. I think Canyon Passage is the most interesting in the sense that like it has this kind of European perspective about the violence of America, and like it's never going to be something that's like as accomplished as First Cow, which has this like beautiful multicultural lens of like the possibilities of like what the world could be, right? Like that's sort of like where we end up with the final film in the series, Kelly Reichardt's First Cow, is like this gorgeous portrayal of like this is what could have happened. like there could have been like a natural point to of where we ended up, like this beautiful multicultural society that isn't like grounded in violence and greed. And some of the other films in the middle, like Pale Rider, right, or McCabe and Mrs. Miller, they have this like interesting like 70s and 80s way of dealing with it in a purely genre sense, and there's a lot of elision. So like to me it's a political act to just like not have indigenous characters in a Western. Like I think it was an instinct of a lot of filmmakers to be like, I want to focus on something else, so I'm not going to have like the conflict with the indigenous people be an element in my film
Hmm.
because I want to avoid politics, but in a way like that's a political
That's
act.
still a political statement,
Right?
right? Yes.
And I don't think that the films are inherently problematic because of that, like those two examples, but it's interesting that it's something that like they're not engaging with.
Yeah, it's like, what kind of lens
directly.
are we trying to take? Like, whose perspective are we valuing here? Or, yeah, like,
Right.
what kind of narratives are we trying to further?
Yeah. And so Dead Man and First Cow, though, they like go for it straight on, right? And Dead Man so much so, which is one of the reasons I wanted to start with the series with that film, is very regionally specific in the sense that like Jim Jarmusch worked with the Makah tribe of the Northwest up in Nia Bay to like recreate an entire Makah village. And it
Wow.
becomes this like epic historical facsimile of like what one of these villages would have like looked and operated like, and it
Wow.
becomes like the like crescendo of the film. And it was this like act of native depiction that like wasn't really something you were seeing in, I mean, just any film in general,
Yeah.
up until that point.
Very cool.
Ryan, you're making me even more excited for this series talking about it than I was before. Like, you know, Canyon Passage, for example, is like, I've never seen it, but it's one of those movies that, you know, film people talk about in revered tones. So I was noticing in the series, I'm very excited for McCabe and Mrs. Miller. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. And, you know, I own it on that Criterion disc, the new one that came out fairly recently. But I noticed you're programming it in 35. It's a 35 millimeter print, which
Oh, yes.
I think it would be great if you could talk a little bit about why it's such a unique opportunity to see a movie like McCabe and some of the others in 35 millimeter.
Absolutely. I'm an analog junkie, and you know, I weep tears of joy anytime I get to see something projected on film. In particular, I'm very excited about the McCabe and Mrs. Miller print. It was honestly one of the motivating factors for the series in general, because I'm friends with the folks who run the Chicago Film Society, and this is their personal print.
Oh.
And I missed the screening after I moved out here, and so I was like a little envious, and I thought like, how can I just get it out here?
I was wondering where it came from, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, film people know. Like, I'm like, where did this print come from? What's the origin? Because there can't be that many prints of it left.
There are not, and
Yeah.
it's a very, very special print. I've been told it's just like absolutely stunning to look at. So I mean, make sure you attend that. We'll be doing 2 screenings of that one because it is such a special print. And yeah, it's getting harder and harder to track down prints for a lot of these films, and a lot of them aren't in great condition. Like we're gonna still have like a beautiful presentation of The Hanging Tree, the Delmer Daves film. But like I was like searching everywhere under like every rock. I was like reaching out to so many different film archives to be like, do you have a 35 millimeter print of this film? I was like looking up every screening of it on film within the last 20 years, and like all of them have been pulled from circulation, the prints, because of just the condition they're in.
Yeah.
And it was too risky to show it. So that's becoming like a reality in certain respects, that like some films, it's just like you can't get prints of them anymore because they're so fragile. But at the same time, it's so important to exhibit them on their original format because there's just a unique beauty, and especially with McCabe and Mrs. Miller, a film that is so visually unique and
It's
distinct,
unbelievable.
and like just has its own physical quality that is like unmatched in like any film. To me, it was essential to be able to show that one on film.
I want to second the idea that people should go see it, because I think the final 30 minutes of the movie sum up exactly why you programmed this entire series, just in terms of its scope and what it's about and the size of it. So
Yeah, thank you.
it's very exciting.
Okay, I'm going to have to go check this out. Ryan, remind us of the dates. I believe it premieres today, Tuesday, January 13th, and it runs through February?
Yep, it runs through the final week of February. The 24th, I believe, is the first McCabe screening, and then we have another one that'll be that Saturday.
Great. And where are people going to see this?
These will all be at the SIFF Film Center, which is right there in the Seattle Center campus. It's a really lovely space to watch a film. It's like a 90-seat jewel box theater.
Nice.
Feels like a cinematheque, you know. It's very dark in there, which is one of the things I like
Yes.
about it. You know,
Yes.
somebody's screens these days, the rooms are so bright, and that
Yep.
one's like nice and dark. So I think it'll really shine, you know. And I'm also the other film we're showing on a 35 millimeter print of is Clint Eastwood's Pale Rider, which is shot in the Idaho sawtooths, and it's like a film shot during the autumn. So I'm really excited to see just like those autumn leaves on film.
Very cool.
And that was a funny example of us like reaching out to the studio and them saying like, well, we have like a brand new 4K restoration. And I was like, no, can I please have like the beat up print that you showed
Yeah.
at the New Beverly a couple of years ago?
I saw that. I was at that one of the screenings of that.
No
Yeah.
kidding. How did it look?
It looked amazing. It looked
Okay, good.
amazing, and it was my first New Beverly experience, I think, and it was really, really special.
Oh, good. I'm so glad to hear that it does look good because
Yeah.
they were like trying to talk me out of it. And I was like, I don't know. I've heard really great things about how it looks.
I want
so-
this print.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
All right,
amazing.
Ryan, before we let you go, I do want to ask, I feel like it's been a tough year or so. I don't know, a tough decade maybe for arts in Seattle. What is something that's happening in the arts or film scene here besides the Pacific Northwestern that you're excited about that's happening?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I mean, I think that there's a lot of really committed programmers here in Seattle that are trying to do new and exciting things and like really make Seattle like a destination city for film. In particular, like, you know, I could toot my own horn about some of the things we're trying to do with
Toot your own
SIFF
horn.
this year. I mean, well, yeah, of course, you know, I'm excited about the Northwestern series. I'm hoping to launch some new series like later in the year. Very excited about Noir City coming up. The lineup should be out soon. I love film
Wait,
noir.
say a little bit about that. I don't know it.
Oh, sure. That's the annual festival that Eddie Muller does. He tours like a few different cities in the country, but we always host it at SIFF in February. So it's just like a lineup of film noirs, primarily from the 40s and 50s. I can't spoil anything about the films, but there's like some really exciting stuff that I'm looking forward to. But that's like a great celebration of classic cinema, and we get to have it at the SIFF downtown, so you get to see it on like a big, beautiful, sparkling screen.
And Eddie's amazing. I've heard him introduce films before, and he's
Oh,
just,
yeah.
like, he's a special film historian in America.
Super funny, like nice
Yeah.
guy.
Loves
But
cocktails.
He
He's a
certainly
big, yeah,
does.
yeah, he's cool.
But I also like feel the need to shout out the folks at the Beacon who are always doing like incredibly inventive and unique programming. That's a great space to see a film. I love hanging out over there. And then a buddy and I have been working on a new like experimental series that has
Ooh.
typically been being hosted at the SIFF Film Center. It's primarily run by David Donnell. It's a series called Mount Analog. And we've been trying to show more things on film and just like focusing on like film as art type of cinema.
Mhm.
And so like later this month, there will be a screening of Apichatpong Weerasethakul's film Mysterious Object at Noon, which is a really beautiful, it won't be a print, but it's a gorgeous restoration of it. And I know that all his films have been restored, so I think we're hoping to get more of those in Seattle later in
I think
the year.
Liam is
That-
salivating.
That's amazing because I love that. I love his films, and that's really, really exciting. And they don't exhibit very often.
No, very infrequently.
So that's really cool.
All right. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And Liam, thank you for adding your film nerdery to all of this.
Anytime, Jane. Literally anytime. Thanks, Ryan.
And all right, folks, if you want to go check out the Pacific Northwestern, it opens today and goes for another few weeks. So get your tickets.